Look, I got to say, this is a tough interview, but I think she's doing really well. Bret Baier's doing a good job, and so is she. This tough type of interview is going to be great for her. She's holding her own.
More than 70% of people
that is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Bret.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam Vice President.
You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
people have become,
but listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances.
I had to stop the clip because she was mostly just talking about Trump. She seems to be holding her own just fine, right, Don? Can somebody check the teleprompter on Kamala? It looks like she's on the wrong page because Baier was talking about something completely unrelated to Donald Trump here. And I love how he said that he didn't know what the heck she was talking about, because that was my reaction when I saw this. How are you somehow making this about Donald Trump when you've been in office for the last 3.5 years? And before we even get to these clips of Harris sinking her own campaign down the drain, listen to what Bret Baier had to say about this interview. Check this out. And guys, thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for hitting the like button and subscribing. Don't forget to check us out over on our Patreon community, where we drop early release content, commercial free, and I release exclusive videos that unfortunately I can't share here. Hit the link, join us over on Patreon right now. Let's get started.
You know, when the kicker in football, they call a timeout right before he's going to kick the field goal. They're icing the kicker. So we were supposed to start at 5 p.m. This was the time they gave us. Originally, we were going to do 25 or 30 minutes. They came in and said, well, maybe 20. So it was already getting whittled down. And then the vice president showed up about 5:15. We were pushing the envelope to be able to turn it around for the top of the 6 o'clock. So that's how it started. And I could tell when we started talking that she was going to be tough to redirect without me trying to interrupt. I did this with President Obama. At one point, I just said, Mr. President, I know you like the filibuster. I just didn't even have the chance to sometimes redirect in those ways. I had a lot of other questions.
So she's running for president and she runs late for a schedule that she gave herself. What? Yeah, I know. This interview started as well as many of us thought that it would. Don Lemon needs some new eyeglasses and maybe even a hearing aid, because Kamala Harris did not hold her own in this Fox interview. Not at all. There were moments where you saw her visibly triggered by some of these questions that were centered around the rhetoric against Donald Trump. It's no secret that they've contributed to the assassination attempts of the former president. They've done it through the violent rhetoric and the language that they've pushed on mainstream media. But here's what happens when she's confronted with the truth.
In fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Bret, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to
that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Come on, Bret, don't show her the truth. She doesn't like that. She's more accustomed to propaganda, and that's what they've pushed on Donald Trump all these years. Does anybody here agree with Kamala Harris that Trump is the guy who puts Americans last, the one who demeans the people of this country? And you could see how pissed off she got when she got fact-checked right to her face. Because these journalists asked Donald Trump about this enemy within talk. But if we go by these past few years, we can confirm that Donald Trump has been investigated thoroughly by the current administration. Also, the current administration is guilty of locking people up for their criticizing them, for saying things that go against their narrative. Kamala Harris is again projecting. They're the ones who worked with social media companies to deplatform and silence individuals from saying things during their pandemic. And this is also why they don't like Elon Musk, because many people believe that he's returned our freedom of speech. It's pretty hard to spread misinformation when you've got community notes on X, which shows you that there's an enemy within, those who want to stifle our freedoms. And it's pretty evident with the federal government. I mean, you can see it in different government agencies. So her trying to spin this around to say that Donald Trump is calling us the enemy is misleading. Now, what's really amusing is that Trump's social media team posted this interview in full and called it their latest ad, which is honestly true because she self-destructed throughout this entire discussion. Now, this brings me to one of the most important parts of this interview. Kamala Harris's team is trying to piss off Donald Trump by calling him mentally unstable. Baier, on his end, didn't let this go because we've had President Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years. And with his debate performance on CNN, he proved that he was the one who was suffering from mental lapses. Look at how Kamala Harris reacts when she's challenged on this particular fact.
Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump.
The significance of that.
You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now he's unstable.
He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room. And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out.
I guess Biden seemed fine for her. Other than that, she also seemed to be okay with the border crisis. She's given a simple, canned answer for this issue. It's all Donald Trump's fault for killing their border bill.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the CHIPS and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the...
Yes, ma'am. May I finish responding, please? But you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate,
I'm
and
in
they
the
didn't
middle
bring up
of
that bill.
Now, she knows what it feels like to be interrupted whenever she answers, something that's been done to Trump and J.D. Vance this entire campaign run. And this is what happens when Kamala Harris doesn't have a teleprompter. This is what happens when the one who's interviewing her is not helping her out, when she's actually asked questions that need answers to. Many now believe the election is done with this interview, which is bad news for the Democratic Party as we're now closer to it than ever. But what did you guys think about this entire interview?
And then also from that video, I started getting a lot of messages like to my Instagram from like actual like aircraft commanders, like squadron commanders.
No kidding.
I had a squadron commander from North Carolina reach out to me. They had to load a C-17 full of supplies just to take a photo op for Kamala. And they never sent the bird.
Wait a minute, what?
They loaded an entire C-17 full of supplies for the hurricane victims, just for Kamala to go there, take a photo, take a video, and they never sent the C-17.
Unbelievable.
It was just
Are you serious?
Yeah, that was a National Guard, North Carolina National Guard unit. That was a 06 that reached out to me.
Whoa, she blocked the National Guard from delivering supplies. And at the same time, she's stabbing Donald Trump in the back, saying that he's not doing anything to help. And then Kamala Harris is over here blocking the help. What in the world is going on here, guys? We got to get the word out. Definitely share this video. This is absolutely bananas here.
And then I had another.
He reached out to you to tell you that they did a photo op and with the intention of never sending.
Never sending. It was just a photo op.
Oh my God. Is anybody else as infuriated as I am about this? What the heck is going on in Washington, D.C. here, folks?
3.5 years ago, right? Kamala has already cost the typical family $29,000 with her horrible inflation and the cost of inflation. Yet she said this week, when asked the question, that she can't think of one thing she could do differently, right? So, you know what? Take a look at the video. We're going to talk about that. Take a look, not one thing. Take a look at this.
Oh, folks, Kamala Harris has received devastating news from CNN, and CNN can no longer hide this anymore from the American people.
But I will say, if you've been paying attention to social media or reporting on CNN, Democrats seem particularly worried now. Why?
I think that this is really the type of thing that gets Democrats really to worry, John, because the simple fact is Kamala Harris is doing considerably worse than either Biden or Clinton was. Yeah.
She has not done well for our economy. She has opened our borders. She is soft on crime, and her cohort wants to put tampons in boys' bathrooms.
Believes that he or she is special or unique can only be understood by special people. Requires excessive admiration.
Oh, check.
Wow. So Joy Behar is essentially calling Donald Trump, well, really, Joy Behar and Dr. Phil are calling Donald Trump a narcissist. And not only that, but they're actually attacking Donald Trump's daughter.
therapists, a lot of respected psychologists out there, really big time, big names, are saying that Donald Trump is showing signs of narcissism, which, by the way, one of the symptoms is preoccupied with the fantasies of unlimited power, success, and brilliance. And they're questioning that he has narcissistic disorder. Number one, do you think that's a mental illness, narcissism? And if so, is he fit to be president?
Well, Counselor, that's a compound question.
Is everybody ready to turn Pennsylvania red?
Donald Trump has said he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. I urge you to look at Project 2025, and you will see it is incredibly important. And I know you, and I can see you are a patriot. That we have the President of the United States who honors the oath that they take to support the Constitution of the United States. Donald Trump has said he will be a dictator on day one.
Well, folks, Kamala Harris has received devastating news from CNN, and CNN can no longer hide this anymore from the American people. In fact, we've actually heard from Harry Enten from CNN. Horrible news. This is probably the worst news that Kamala Harris could have possibly received just before the 2024 presidential election. And this could very well be perceived as basically CNN saying Donald Trump could win this election in a landslide victory in only a couple of weeks. I want you guys to listen to what CNN's Harry Enten basically uncovers and unveils about the truth behind the polls and the data that we are seeing now about Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. And it's astounding, guys. Watch.
Eternal question. Why some Democrats worry? Now, it's a trope. A lot of people will say they're always worried. But I will say, if you've been paying attention to social media or reporting on CNN, Democrats seem particularly worried now. Why? One man, as we say, has the answer. CNN's chief senior data reporter, Harry Enten, is here. So, why?
Why? What is with all of this bedwetting among Democrats? Maybe it's an eternal problem, but let's take a look here. These are, of course, the Great Lake battleground states, the states we've been focusing in on. If Kamala Harris wins these three, she most likely gets to 270 electoral votes. Take a look 3 weeks ago. Harris was ahead by 2 in Pennsylvania, 2 in Wisconsin, 3 in Michigan. Look at where we are today. The race is even tighter than it was. Today, it's a 1-point advantage in Pennsylvania, 1 in Wisconsin, 1 in Michigan. Look, that's limited movement, but in a year in which this race has been so static, if we're talking 1-point movement, 1-point movement, 2-point movements, and we see movements in all three, this is the type of thing that, at least in the public polling, makes Democrats worry. And I think that the public polling in this case is reflected in some of that internal polling, some of that reporting that suggests that these Great Lake battleground states have certainly tightened a lot, where at this point they are way too close to call.
It is what you call a trend.
It is
when
a
you
trend.
See something like this over several states. When you compare
now, I just want to add a little bit of color here, okay, guys? 3 weeks ago, they're saying 3 weeks ago, Kamala Harris had a 2-point lead, 2-point lead, 3-point lead. We're talking about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, right? Today, the lead, according to CNN, is 1-1-1 point across these 3 swing states. Now, what we've seen traditionally is that these polls they're typically not 100% accurate, in that Donald Trump is typically doing better than what these reports and polls are saying. So what this means is, number one, Donald Trump is moving ahead. This is 3 weeks ago. Kamala Harris has lost footing. She's lost ground. She's losing 1 point in Pennsylvania. She's losing 1 point from 3 weeks ago to today in Wisconsin, and she's lost 2 points in the polls in Michigan compared to 3 weeks ago compared to today. So this could very well mean that Donald Trump is actually winning at this point, since these polls typically, when you look historically, these polls they're lacking on the Donald Trump statistics. In other words, usually if Usually Donald Trump is about 3, maybe even 4 points higher than what the polls actually report. But even with that aside, we can clearly see that as the weeks go by, Kamala Harris's poll performance continues to get worse.
Compare this to 4 years ago. What does it look like?
Yeah, so let's take a look, and we're going to look at an average across these 3 states, right? Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, an average on October 11th. What do you see? Well, if you look 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton was way out in front in an average of these 3. She was up by 8.
And she still lost.
Joe Biden was up by an
And she still lost. Look, Hillary Clinton was up by 8 points in 2016, and she still lost to Donald Trump back then. So keep that in mind.
average of 7 points across these 3 Great Lake battleground states. You come today, it's just a 1-point advantage for Kamala Harris across these 3 Great Lake battleground states. So Kamala Harris, at least in the polling, is doing considerably worse than Biden or Clinton. And of course, Clinton lost in all 3 of these states, and Joe Biden barely won in all 3 of these states. So when you see Harris up by just a point across these 3, I think that this is really the type of thing that gets Democrats really to worry, John, because the simple fact is Kamala Harris is doing considerably worse than either Biden or Clinton was.
Yeah, at this number, when you start.
Wow, this is the kind of news that really has Democrats worried, and this is what they don't want you guys to hear about. I'm honestly really impressed / surprised that CNN is revealing this data here.
3.5 years ago, right? Kamala has already cost the typical family $29,000 with her horrible inflation and the cost of inflation. Yet she said this week, when asked the question, that she can't think of one thing she could do differently, right? So, you know what? Take a look at the video. We're going to talk about that. Take a look, not one thing. Take a look at this.
Should you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
I stood there on the tarmac watching you check your watch.
The chaotic and U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan stunned Americans and the world and cost the lives of 13 U.S. soldiers.
Would you have done something differently?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
More than 13,000 illegal immigrants convicted of murder have been caught at the border and then released into the United States.
An Afghan national is in custody today after being accused of plotting an election day. The suspect entered the U.S. on a special immigrant visa.
Gut-wrenching new details in the Georgia nursing student Laken Riley. The illegal immigrant suspect, who cops say committed the is a Venezuelan national who crossed the unsecured southern border back in 2022.
2 men investigators say are in the country illegally from Venezuela are charged with and the death of Jocelyn Nungaray.
A 5th illegal immigrant accused of 2 New York City police officers over the weekend showed no remorse or regret.
Would you have done something differently?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Only 18% say the economy is in excellent or good condition. US inflation has hit a new 40-year high, increasing by 9.1% over the financial year.
The cost of homes have spiked. Home buyers need to earn 80% more than they did in 2020 to afford a house.
Unbelievable, guys. Unfreaking real.
Is everybody ready to turn Pennsylvania red? It most certainly looks red to me right now. What a good group, you guys. We have seen the beautiful Kamala Harris for 1,400 days in the White House.
The beautiful Kamala Harris
cannot articulate for us what her policies are. And that's because she doesn't have any. No, I should take that back. She's now adopting my favorite president's policies. She is anti-fracking. She has not done well for our economy. She has opened our borders. She is soft on crime. And her cohort wants to put tampons in boys' bathrooms.
Let's not forget about the fact that they want to have men punch women in the face. They want to have men in women's sports. How is that okay, guys?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am a MAGA woman with babies, and that ain't happening. come from, when you fail at your job for 1,400 days, you don't get another 1,460 days.
Not only that, she wants a promotion.
And if you ever have any doubts about her position on her performance, her review on The View yesterday, she said she wouldn't change a damn thing.
Guys, and the crazy thing about this, and nobody's actually talking about this, I'm actually glad Alina Habba brought this up. No one really is calling out the fact that The View asked her a very specific question about what she would do differently compared to Joe Biden in her presidency if she became president of the United States. She word saladed her way in responding to the question on The View, but then Sunny Hostin asked her again the same question because it was clear that the first time she asked it, she never got an answer. Unbelievable, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying so, Kamala. But the American people decide who gets promoted. And you are not getting promoted. You are fired. Let's win.
Get her out of there.
If you take out everybody that has any of those characteristics, then you're going to take out a lot of people, including some at this table.
That look on Joy's face is a telltale sign that she knows Dr. Phil is calling her out.
So,
do y'all need a minute?
No, that's all right.
No, she's got to ask you this question.
Yeah, I
She's
got to
been
ask you this
burning.
because though they can't diagnose anybody, from afar, somebody they haven't examined, doctors, therapists, a lot of respected psychologists out there, really big names, are saying that Donald Trump is showing signs of narcissism, which, by the way, one of the symptoms is preoccupied with the fantasies of unlimited power, success, and brilliance. And they're questioning that he has narcissistic disorder. Number one, do you think that's a mental illness, narcissism? And if so, is he fit to be president?
Well, Counselor, that's a compound question, and I object. But, people talk about narcissism, but they don't really know what it means. So I brought a list from the DSM-5 about what narcissism really is, because if I asked people to stand up and define it, they wouldn't know.
All right.
And let's just take a vote. One, has a grandiose sense of self-importance.
Check.
Check. Okay.
Next.
Two, is preoccupied with fantasies of success, power, or brilliance, which you said. Check. Okay. Three, believes that he or she is special or unique.
Check.
Can only be understood by special people. Four, requires excessive admiration.
Oh, check.
Has a sense of entitlement, which means is very thin-skinned.
Check.
Is interpersonally exploitive. Lacks empathy. Has the inability to stand in other people's shoes and understand.
You mean like when he makes fun of...
Wow. So Joy Behar is essentially calling Donald Trump, Joy Behar and Dr. Phil are calling Donald Trump a narcissist. And not only that, but they're actually attacking Donald Trump's daughter. Can you believe this? This is like a new level of low to attack a presidential candidate's daughter, their offspring, their child, their children. Wow. Is there no end to the Democratic desperation here? What's crazy is I used to think I could do it on my own, all by myself. But after years of spinning my wheels, I realized something was missing. It wasn't more hustle or more effort. It was the right people. Then all of a sudden, one day, I connected with somebody who had already achieved the success that I was actually striving for. And suddenly, everything changed. That's the power of your network. Inside the Life Pursuit Network, you'll find people who have been exactly where you are now and have risen to the top. They've already learned lessons and they've paved the way, and now they're ready to help you do the same. Join us right now. Click the link down below and unlock the potential of a powerful network of people that can change your life. But act fast because spots are limited. Did she win your vote, or did she push you further away from her and further toward Donald Trump? You might think that this was a biased interview. Okay, fair. But I did a previous live stream where she completely embarrasses herself in another interview, this time with Charlene the God. a guy who clearly supports Kamala Harris. Make sure you watch that one right after this one because it shows you the truth about her. Now, as always, appreciate you guys being here and watching. Thank you so much for hitting the like button and subscribing. We'll see you next time.